Wow, good evening. It's an absolute honor to be here tonight under the auspices of the Clinton Library. And this institution not only embodies the spirit of public service at the heart of the 42nd President's legacy, but also reminds us of the importance of education in society today. President Clinton was an early and active voice in the education reform movement, both as governor and then as president, where he began the direct lending program, passed the School to Work law, and launched the movement towards higher standards and better assessments. Today, our administration is building upon his legacy and his accomplishments. His Education Secretary, Dick Riley, remains an important voice in the national conversation around education reform. Formally and informally, he has been an amazing advisor to me on a whole host of issues, and I'm so thankful for his guidance and his support. And so I begin by saluting President Clinton for his life of service to this state and to this nation, and his continuing work on behalf of disadvantaged people both here and across the globe. And today, as he strives to help Haiti rebuild his devastated schools, I would love to support those efforts in any way possible. He's an absolute inspiration to people of every generation. He has made a difference in so many ways and for so many people, and yet, by all appearances, he shows no signs of slowing down. He is, in the fullest sense, a public servant whose extraordinary insights into the challenges facing our world are exceeded only by his tireless efforts to address them. And so I thank him for providing this opportunity, and I thank all of you for coming here tonight. I've come to Little Rock to begin our back-to-school bus tour at historic Central High School, where 53 years ago, the nation's attention was riveted by the courageous efforts of 9 African-American teenagers and their families who are striving for a better education. And I'm thrilled that 2 of the Little Rock 9 and 2 of the heroes of the civil rights movement, Elizabeth Eckford and Minnie Jean Brown Trickey, are here tonight. Despite the taunts, despite the hatred, they and the other members of the Little Rock 9 integrated Central High. And please, could I ask Elizabeth and Minnie Jean to stand, and let's give them a huge round of applause. Every day I think about the people in our history who had that quality of courage. People like Dr. Martin Luther King and all of the heroes of the civil rights movement who forced a complacent and even a reluctant nation to face the shameful realities of discrimination and to do something about it. The Little Rock 9 possessed almost unimaginable courage and forever changed the course of public education in our country. Today, I continue to see real courage exhibited in schools and classrooms all across America. Teachers and principals who get up every day and face the extraordinary challenge of preparing our children for life in a democratic society and a global economy. They, as much as anyone, are fulfilling the promise of equality embedded in our founding documents and codified in our laws over the past 234 years. And that is why I so often say that education is the civil rights issue of our generation. They have chosen to be educators because, like President Clinton and Dr. King, they want to make a difference. They want to see our children succeed, and they want to see our country grow stronger. These educators are willing to work in our toughest schools with our most challenging students, devoting themselves completely and selflessly. They are heroes in every sense of the world, and we launched this bus tour to honor America's teachers and to celebrate courage in our classrooms. Over the next week, in large and small communities across America, we'll be meeting with teachers, hearing their voices, acknowledging the hard work ahead, and most of all, thanking them for their commitment. Joining me on the tour will be several public school teachers who are spending a year at the Department of Education, advising me and helping us shape our policy and serving as resources to their colleagues in the classroom. Many of them are here tonight, and Lori and Nicholas and Edith and Leah and Linda, I thank you so much for your service. As my staff travels across the country, they will also carry the same message of gratitude and appreciation for the hard work and commitment of our nation's teachers. and an open ear to hear them as they share their aspirations and their frustrations. Our hope is that in the coming weeks, every community in America and every parent in America takes time to thank their teachers and offer a helping hand, because the responsibility for educating our children should never fall to teachers alone. It is all of ours. It is everyone's responsibility. As all of you know, it begins at birth, years before a child ever sets foot in a school. It continues every afternoon and evening and on the weekends at home. It happens in the community every day, wherever people gather and bond. And it doesn't end when the college diploma is granted. Employers spend tens of billions of dollars each year training employees to meet the changing demands of the workplace. More than any other issue, education is our shared responsibility, and we all have a role to play. We begin this new school year at a time when so much about public education is changing for the better. All across America, stakeholders inside and outside the education system are breaking down barriers to reform, forging new partnerships, and pursuing bold new strategies for improvement. The need for change has never been greater. A quarter, 25% of our students, our nation's students, never graduate from high school. Many of those who do graduate don't enroll in college, or they fail to earn a degree. In just one generation, we have fallen from first in the world to 12th in the percentage of young adults with college degrees. President Obama has set a goal of, again, having our country lead the world by 2020, in a decade, and that goal drives everything we're doing from cradle to career. It starts with early learning, where we are realigning our work with the Department of Health and Human Services, which runs Head Start, in order to boost both access and quality. Every study shows that one of the best investments we can make is to expand quality early learning programs. And if we're serious about closing achievement gaps, we must do so much more to level the playing field before children ever enter kindergarten. And among the more noteworthy events of the past year was a press conference held by top military officials saying that the declining educational quality in our country was a threat to our national security. And these military leaders were calling for greater investment in pre-K programs. I've learned a few things in Washington, and one of the things I've learned is it's always good to have the military guys on your side. And we're so pleased with their leadership. On the back end, we're dramatically boosting access and quality in higher education, both through increased Pell Grants, greater investments in community colleges and minority-serving institutions, and a variety of reforms to our student lending programs. There's much more we are doing in higher education, but I'll save that for another speech. Tonight, I want to talk with you about what we're trying to do at the K-12 level to drive reform through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act and the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which is currently known as No Child Left Behind. Today, more than half a century after Brown versus Board of Education and the Little Rock Nine, the promise of equal education remains unfulfilled for millions of low-income and minority Americans. This unfulfilled promise led Congress in 1965 to create a federal law specifically aimed at overcoming inherent inequities in education. Virtually every administration has put its stamp on that law, including Bill Clinton's and George W. Bush's, and now it's President Obama's turn. Our work on reauthorization of ESEA has been underway for more than a year, and while it may or may not make it to the finish line in the current session of Congress, we expect it will be among the top priorities in the next one. We will absolutely continue to work in a bipartisan manner. In any case, our approach to reforming the Elementary and Secondary Education Act is fairly straightforward and is defined by three words: fair, flexible, and focused. We want more fairness in how states and districts and schools are held accountable. We want to create more space and greater flexibility in how schools and districts can innovate and improve. And we want more focus on the schools and students most at risk of academic failure. Essentially, we want a smaller, humbler, and more effective law. Instead of holding only schools accountable, we want to hold districts and states more accountable as well. As all of you know, no school is an island operating in isolation. Instead of prescribing specific and often impractical interventions for the vast majority of schools from Washington, We want to offer a clear definition of success and let most schools figure out how to get there. We have to better support creativity and innovation at the local level, which is where the best ideas in education will always come from. And for the very lowest performing schools, we want to provide many more resources, not for the status quo, but in exchange for dramatic and comprehensive reforms that have demonstrated success in districts across the country. We will maintain key formula programs for low-income students, English language learners, special education students, and other special populations like homeless, migrant, and rural students. And the vast majority of our resources will always remain in formula programs. But we also want to embed into the law competitive grant programs like Race to the Top that are proving so effective in driving reform at the state and at the local level. This $4.3 billion programming, representing less than 1% of education spending nationally, has prompted states and districts across America to change laws, remove obstacles to reform, and encourage stakeholders to work together in ways that they honestly haven't done in decades. More than 30 states have changed laws around the issue of public charter schools and teacher evaluation. And today, 37 states have agreed to adopt higher, common, college and career-ready standards, and others are moving in that direction. And I want to congratulate your state, Arkansas, on taking this bold step for your students last month. These higher standards are an absolute game changer. As a country, we will finally stop dumbing down standards and stop lying to our children and to our families. All told, 46 states and the District of Columbia applied for Race to the Top funds. And just yesterday, we announced the final winners of this year's competition. We now have 11 states, along with D.C., positioned to bring real and lasting change to American education, and 35 others with comprehensive plans in hand that will shape their reform agenda as we move forward. Whether or not they receive funds under this program, we'll find ways to help every state push forward with their reforms, because every state in America needs to get better. And I just want to salute Arkansas for its work in a number of areas. Your state is absolutely raising the bar in providing educational leadership that is resonating nationally. Arkansas has adopted Common Core standards developed by governors and chief state school officers, and will use student growth in its accountability system. Arkansas is a national leader in expanding student access to rigorous high school courses. The state requires every high school to offer at least 4 AP classes, and the state has tripled the percentage of graduating seniors who took at least 1 AP exam. That's a big deal, opening a new world of opportunity for your students. And my understanding is that Central High School, in fact, is now drawing students from the suburbs attracted to that school's high-quality programs. Arkansas is also a leader in the use of data. It is one of the few states in the country with all 10 of the essential elements identified by the Data Quality Campaign, DQC. Based on the state's record and a strong application, Arkansas recently won a federal grant from us of nearly $10 million to develop a statewide data system that will support data-driven decision-making at the state and at the local level. And finally, Arkansas will ultimately benefit after a separate group of states wins a share of $350 million in Race to the Top funds to create the next generation of assessments that will better measure students' critical thinking skills and be more useful in helping to drive improved instruction. All of this makes me absolutely confident that Arkansas is headed in the right direction. And as we move ahead, the big game changer for us, in terms of both formula and competitive programs, revolves around the complex issue of teacher quality. Nothing is more important, and nothing has a greater impact on the quality of education than the quality and skill of that person standing in the front of the class. And there's so much that needs to change in the way America recruits, trains, supports, and nurtures our nation's teachers. Today, there are many different approaches to strengthening the teaching profession, both here in America and in countries that are currently outperforming us, like Finland and Singapore. The Asia Society recently held an international symposium on teacher quality, and they found that high-performing countries put much more energy into recruiting, preparing, and supporting good teachers, rather than on the back end by reducing attrition or firing weak teachers. Our competitors in other parts of the world recognize that the roles of teachers are changing. Today, they are expected to prepare knowledge workers, not factory workers, and to help every single child succeed, not just those that are easy to teach. They have to harness new technologies and teach higher order thinking skills. According to the report from the symposium, Singapore selects prospective teachers from the top third of the class. And in Finland, only 1 in 10 applicants is accepted into teacher preparation programs. They only allow the very best to become teachers. England undertook a series of steps to raise the status of the teaching profession in that country. This included a sophisticated advertising campaign, a televised awards program to raise the profile of teaching, and encouragement for alternate routes into teaching. They also provided bonuses to attract teachers to commit to teaching in high-need, underserved communities. In just 5 short years, teaching went from being one of the least desired professions in England to being one of the most desired. The other big findings are that the best teacher preparation programs place more emphasis on guided practice in classroom settings, more focus on problem solving and creativity, and more attention on the use of data and assessment to guide instruction. When it comes to compensation and evaluation, there's greater variation. We know that entry-level salaries for teachers need to be competitive with other jobs in order to attract high-quality graduates. But beyond that, working conditions are actually much more important than salary. Finland and Canada do not pay teachers based upon performance, but China and Singapore do. And many countries use financial incentives in hard-to-staff schools. Most important, teachers in Singapore are appraised annually by several people and across multiple measures, including classroom delivery, collaboration with parents and community groups, and contribution to their colleagues and to the school as a whole. The issue of teacher evaluation is especially important today for a number of reasons. First of all, everyone agrees that our current evaluation systems are largely fundamentally broken. In many districts, literally 99% of teachers are rated satisfactory, and most evaluations ignore the most important measure of a teacher's success, which is how much their students have actually learned. Many teachers get little or no meaningful feedback and are literally denied access to data that can show them if they are making a difference, and that's the tragedy. Teachers want and need this information. Today I have to ask, are we setting up our teachers for success or for failure? Teachers also worry that their job security and salaries will be tied to results on a bubble test that is largely disconnected from the material that they are teaching. As I said a few weeks ago in a speech in Washington, no one thinks that test scores should be the only factor in teacher evaluations, and no one wants to evaluate teachers based on a single test given on a single day. That makes no sense. But looking at student progress over time, in combination with multiple measures like peer review and principal observation, can lead to a culture shift in our schools where we finally take good teaching as seriously as the profession deserves. This is a complicated and emotional issue for teachers, and just got more emotional in the past 10 days with a series of articles on teacher quality published by the Los Angeles Times. Essentially, that newspaper took 7 years of student data and developed what is called a value-added analysis to show which 3rd through 5th grade teachers are showing the biggest gains with their students. And the results may soon be posted on the newspaper's website in a searchable database by teacher name, taking transparency to a whole new level. Needless to say, concerns are running very high in Los Angeles, not only among teachers themselves, but also among a wide spectrum of administrators, academics, and reformers who question the validity of these scores and the value of the entire exercise. Still others worry about parents with a limited understanding of what this information really means, jockeying to place their children with the highest ranking teachers. I'm a strong advocate for transparency. This is one thing that NCLB got right. By requiring districts to publish test scores for subgroups, like minorities and special needs students, it changed the national conversation and forced us to focus much more closely on our nation's insidious achievement gaps. If it was up to me and the law allowed it, I would put out student attendance data and hold parents accountable. And while we're at it, And while we're at it, let's put out funding and facilities data and hold school boards and politicians accountable. Let's put out data on dropouts, college enrollment, college completion, loan default rates, and every other kind of data that can help us highlight our many remarkable success stories, and on the flip side, help us better understand why too many of our nation's children are unprepared and undereducated. Let's all of us, collectively, let's do what the state of Louisiana is doing, tracking student scores to teachers and teachers back to their colleges of education, so we know who is doing a good job of preparing educators. Because too many of our teacher colleges in this country are doing a mediocre job in preparing teachers. The truth can be hard to swallow, but it can only make us better and stronger and smarter. That's what accountability is all about: facing the truth, taking responsibility, and then taking action. The fact is, today we publish a school scores next to the name of a principal and a district scores next to the name of a superintendent. And as CEO of the Chicago Public Schools, I absolutely felt personally accountable for the achievement of my students. All of us in education have that responsibility, though it can be difficult at times. There are real issues, even competing priorities and values, and we must work through these tough issues together, balancing transparency, privacy, fairness, and respect for teachers. This work is definitely not easy, but it is critically important. And I appreciate how painful this must be for those LA teachers. And I also appreciate the fact that even the best data systems won't tell the whole story. That's why it's so important to get teacher evaluation systems right, to ensure they look at both student learning and other factors, to paint a fuller, more comprehensive picture. Under the best of circumstances, this information would be thoughtfully discussed among teachers, principals, and parents, with the goal of identifying the strongest teachers so we can learn from them and better support those who are struggling. What's especially interesting about the LA Times series is the reaction of some of the teachers quoted in it. And one particular quote haunts me. According to the newspaper, one of LA's most effective teachers is Nancy Polacek, a fourth grade teacher with 38 years experience. She said something that was utterly heartbreaking. In the past, if I were recognized, I would become an outcast, she told the Times. They'd say she's trying to show off. This has nothing to do with showing off and has everything to do with identifying excellence. That shame of success has pervaded America's educational culture for far too long. And I've heard it in my travels all too often, not just from teachers, but also from low-income and minority students who are picked on and ridiculed because they want to do their best in school. As a country, we have to stop highlighting the exploits of ball players and rock stars, and we have to start shining a huge spotlight on those hardworking, successful, committed students and teachers who are literally leading the country where we need to go. They are our true heroes, and they are our true role models. We should celebrate Nancy Polacek and the literally hundreds of thousands of effective teachers like her. Unfortunately, we rarely know who they are. The fact is, instead of shining a spotlight on excellent teachers, our education system often hides them or makes them feel like outcasts. Why? Who benefits from that? There are countless teachers who can help even the most challenging students grow and learn, while others may have only marginal success. In that sense, teachers are no different than any other profession. However, too often, our systems keep all of our teachers in the dark about the quality of their own work. In other fields, we talk about success constantly with statistics and other measures to demonstrate it. Why, in education, are we scared to talk about what success looks like? What is there to hide? Los Angeles illustrates the problem. Like school systems throughout our nation, the LA Unified School District has years of data on its students, yet most administrators never share that information with teachers in a useful way. Similarly, parents don't get solid, helpful information on their children's schools and their teachers. Instead, they rely on legend, intuition, and chance. The state of Tennessee has been collecting value-added data since 1992, but it wasn't until this year that Tennessee changed its law to allow its use in teacher evaluation and to identify the state's lowest performing schools. That fundamental change in the law helped Tennessee win its Race to the Top grant. Every state and district should be collecting and sharing information about teacher effectiveness with teachers and in the context of other important measures with parents. And I think we should also be engaging our students so they take much more personal responsibility for their own education as well. Teachers want this information. They want the feedback, and most importantly, they want to continue to improve and get better. Consider the words of two other teachers who ranked among LA's lowest performers, according to the analysis. Instead of being defensive, which would have been very understandable, one of them was quoted saying, "Obviously, what I need to do is take a look at what I'm doing and take some steps to make sure something changes." He also advocated sharing the data with parents to keep him and his colleagues, quote, "on their toes a little bit more." When another teacher saw her low score, she asked, "What do I need to do to bring my average up?" Such responses, I believe, are real courage in action, and I see that from teachers everywhere. More than 2,000 LA teachers have asked the Times for their scores. It makes no sense they had to wait for a newspaper to share this information with them, and for this to be unfolding in such a public way without their input. We didn't put this information in the newspapers in Chicago, and I don't advocate that for other districts. But the fact that teachers did not have information like this for all those years is ridiculous. Local school districts, in real partnership and collaboration with their teachers, must decide for themselves how to share this information, how to put it in context, and how to use it in order to get better. But we cannot shrink from the truth. Ideally, a good evaluation system will protect teachers because it gives principals and peer reviewers the evidence they need to intervene when they see a problem. A principal should not have to wait for the scores to come out to realize that a teacher's struggling. Educators deserve more than statistics to do their job well. They need constructive feedback from their principal and their peers against clear standards and other relevant measures. This information should be rolled up into a meaningful, ongoing assessment of their work that both helps improve instruction and is tied to opportunities for advancement, bonuses, collaboration, and professional development. Fortunately, the field of education is moving in this more sophisticated direction. States, school districts, and teacher unions are developing new ways of assessing student growth, and along with other measures, identifying, rewarding, and most importantly, learning from great teachers. In fact, administrators and union leaders in Los Angeles are working together to develop a better evaluation system, even as the LA Times situation plays out. And I'm hopeful that they'll come up with a model that is fair and useful, both to teachers and to parents. But frankly, it's been too long in coming, not just in LA, but around the country. The LA Times has ignited an important debate, but it falls on all of us to meet the challenge and talk openly and honestly about this issue. This is going to start happening all over the country, and the administrators and unions need to lead this conversation. They also need to be thoughtful about how they engage the broader community. I know that our national union leaders are eager for this conversation. Many state and local leaders are ready as well. The current evaluation systems simply don't work for their members. For example, right here in Arkansas, the state is developing a comprehensive teacher evaluation system with more than 20 different indicators, including student achievement. Your work, your leadership, and your courage will have national implications as this effort unfolds. We begin with the understanding that the purpose of evaluation is never to blame teachers, but to support and empower them, recognize and reward them, and give them, as AFT President Randy Weingarten has said, the tools, the time, and the trust to succeed. NEA President Dennis Van Roykel has urged me to look towards other countries for better ways to elevate and to honor the teaching profession. Places like South Korea, where teachers are viewed as nation builders that are critical to their country's economic future. The public is also yearning for this conversation. A new poll released today by Phi Beta Kappa and Gallup shows that the number one education priority is improving the quality of teaching. I recently had the opportunity to spend some time with one of the best teachers in America. Her name is Sarah Brown Wesley, and her commitment to every one of her students is both inspiring and remarkable. She teaches in Iowa, and she is the current National Teacher of the Year. And she said it much better than I ever could. She said, and I quote, "We must commit to innovative teaching practices that will create openings to treat students as individuals rather than defer to movements that homogenize them. We trust that high-quality teachers, rich in content knowledge, confident in their skills, and poised to teach habits of mind are the people who will turn our students into autonomous, lifelong learners." Tomorrow morning, I'm getting on a bus to meet with teachers in Arkansas and 7 other states. My message to those dedicated public servants is simple and clear. You are our national unsung heroes. Not only do we trust you, but we hold you in the very highest esteem. We understand that you are doing society's most important work. We will support you in your work, and we will work together with you to elevate and strengthen the teaching profession, because nothing less than America's future rests on your collective shoulders. Thank you so much, and God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And now we're going to open it up to questions. Please raise your hands. Wait till you're recognized. The microphone will come to your seat. Please also, no statements, just questions, because we want everybody to have a question. So anybody that is into a statement, I'm going to excuse you and move the microphone to somebody else. So we're going to start right now with questions, and this woman right here deserves the first question. Wait just a second, Stacy, till we get there.
Mr. Duncan, thank you. You're kind of like,
No statements.
no,
I'm scared where this one's going.
you're kind of like the Rolling Stones to me. I appreciate everything you said about K through 12. Could you step aside from that for just a minute and talk to us about higher education and what you think we are going to have to do to change access and affordability? And also, I'd like for you to address, I recently graduated a daughter from 4 years. She's making in the 20s, and I go to these 2-year schools, and these kids are making in the 50s and 60s and 70s when they leave. How are we going to be able to romanticize the 2-year school?
So a couple of really important questions there. First of all, we've tried to do a tremendous amount of work to make college much more affordable and accessible. And I worry, particularly in tough economic times like this, not just about the juniors and seniors, but I worry about the 9 and 10-year-olds where mom or dad might lose a job or take a 30% pay cut, and they start to think college is for rich folks. It's not for people that look like them. So what we did that I thought was common sense, that ended up being pretty controversial in Washington, we simply cut out the banks as the middleman, stopped subsidizing banks, and took all that money to increase Pell Grants. And so by doing that, without going back to taxpayers for a dime, it's an additional $60 billion, north of $60 billion to make college more accessible and affordable. And I really feel now that we can look every child, every parent in the eye and say, no matter how tough things are at home, if you keep working hard, if you stay on track, you're going to be successful. We also worked very hard to simplify the financial aid form. And those of you that have had to labor through that know you probably need a PhD to get through it. And the problem is when you're 17, you don't quite have that PhD yet. And so a huge step in the right direction. This year we've seen almost a 20% increase in students applying to college, and we think in part it's because that financial aid form was such a huge barrier. I actually spent an inordinate amount of my time in Chicago trying to help my seniors get through that form because they simply couldn't do it. They'd work hard and the form would prevent them. It was absolutely crazy. Had a great move there. So we're making college more accessible, better forms, much more affordable, a massive investment in community colleges. I think community colleges are the unrecognized gem, undervalued gem, jewel along the education continuum. Whether it's green energy jobs or healthcare jobs, technology jobs. And as all of you know, it's not just 18-year-olds, it's 28-year-olds, it's 38-year-olds, it's 58-year-olds who are going back. And as our country gets back on its feet, community colleges are going to help us get where we need to go. And so a $2 billion influx of resources for community colleges. Where I think we have a lot of work that we need to continue to do, so I feel very, very good about that progress, is colleges, it's very interesting, are not that dissimilar to high schools. And to me, it's not just about accessibility and affordability, it's got to be about attainment. It's got to be about graduation. And some colleges do a fantastic job of building a college completion culture and working with first-generation college goers and English language learners, and others don't do that. And we want to do a much better job of really shining a spotlight in those universities that are helping, students at risk get through, not just go, but get through. I think we haven't created enough incentives there historically. It's all about access, not about getting through. And so we think there's some really creative things we can do. And some colleges with very similar populations get radically different results. I started to track this very closely in Chicago. Students with identical GPAs, same schools, same ACT scores, two different universities, very different outcomes. And we frankly started to steer students away from some universities and towards others. They're really doing a great job of helping our students get where we need to go. So I think that conversation and that work remains ahead of us.
Questions? Yes, sir. Fernando, right there. He's standing up.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, my name is Fernando Coots. I'm a student here at the Clinton School, and first, on behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank you for coming out here today. And Dean Rutherford, I'm going to try not to make a statement, but give some background.
Good. No,
is that fair?
we need to do a question, Fernando.
Okay, question. I'll go straight to it. Sorry. It's
The
actually.
grade depends on it, really. Now.
All right, here we go. What's your name? It's actually sort of a follow-up to what was just said. Going to higher education and socioeconomic diversity within that. Before coming here, I was a student at Washington University, and there we started an organization to try to promote better socioeconomic diversity issues. What we found was that the TRIO program was probably the best thing in place, as you were saying, to make students feel welcome, those students that were on Pell Grants, which your administration has done a phenomenal job of improving, So my question is, although Pell Grants have been raised significantly under your administration, the TRIO program has kind of remained stagnant, and only 7% of students that are eligible to join the TRIO program are in it. Do you have any plans to improve that so that students do feel more welcome?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a number of really strong programs. TRIO is one, Gear Up is another. There are other universities and states that are doing their own creative things. We had actually hoped, as part of that higher education reconciliation bill, to get significant, billions of dollars, frankly, to do like a race to top competition amongst universities and put out a huge amount of money to do that. That piece we weren't able to get, and so we haven't invested as much as we'd like. And so whether it's TRIO, whether it's Gear Up, whether it's other creative ideas that universities are doing at the local level, we want to shine a spotlight. We're trying to come up with some additional resources to put behind those places and scale up best practices. So we definitely have some work to do there. The other thing I'd just say for all of you who are in this master's program public service, at the back end of graduation, we lost so much talent historically into the public sector. So working in government, obviously I'm very biased. We need that next generation of great teachers, working in a legal aid clinic in an inner city community or a rural community, a medical clinic. As part of that bill, something was passed called income-based repayment, IBR. This is a huge breakthrough. It reduces loan repayments to 10% of your income, and then after 10 years of public service, all your debt is erased and forgiven. It's all gone. So it's for me, when we talk about trying to bring that next generation of talent into teaching, into the public sector, lots of folks historically wanted to do that, but they just had $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 alone, and they couldn't follow their heart. They couldn't follow their passion. We tried to remove that financial barrier, let folks like you and others with great, great talent make a difference in our communities.
Questions? Yes, sir. Right. Judge Griffin.
Mr. Secretary, with the question being, how is the emphasis on charter schools going to jive with the resegregation of our schools when more charter schools are becoming one-race schools?
It's a great question, and I've had that concern raised in other states, obviously particularly in the South, Alabama, North Carolina. Let me be very, very clear. I'm not a fan of charters. I'm a fan of good charters, and we need more good schools in this country. What we have to do is hold charters accountable. So where they are resegregating, that's not something that we're going to stand by idly and watch. Our Office of Civil Rights has been very active in this area. There's a school that was heading in this direction. We had a series of very clear meetings, and they changed directions very quickly. And whether it's using our office, whether it's local charter authorizers, where charters are resegregating, where they are pushing students out to raise their results, where they're not serving fair proportions of special education students or English language learners or whatever it might be, we need to challenge that. And we absolutely at the local and at the federal level have the right to do that. Having said that, good charters I think are a huge part of the solution. Bad charters are part of the problem. We need to replicate those that are doing a great difference, and often these charters are doing a great job in very disadvantaged communities. And where it's not happening, we need to close them down. I think for charters to be successful, three things have to happen, and this has been uneven around the country. First, I think there has to be a very high barrier to entry. This can't be let 1,000 flowers bloom. I think the chance to educate children is a sacred obligation. It should be a very rigorous review process, and only the best of the best should be allowed to open. Once you do that, you have to free them from bureaucracy. These are by definition education innovators. They think they have an idea, they have a plan, you have to give them the room to move. At the same time, you have to couple that autonomy with real accountability. 5-year performance contracts, whatever it might be. And I had many very high-performing charter schools in Chicago. I also closed 3 down for academic failure. But those 3 things, a high bar to entry, real autonomy, and real accountability, I think will get you the kind of results that we need around the country.
Right, further, we have a question right here from Ken James, the former director of the Arkansas Department of Education.
Mr. Secretary, good to see you. Glad to fly with you today. A couple of quick questions. Just really, I'll focus in on one. All of us in the field know the stats. We know the data. We know where America is in terms of positioning across the globe. How can you help us? How can we help you better connect the dots in our own state and the grassroots? Because there's a real disconnect in terms of, as you look at the states, everybody's perception, like the Gallup poll, we're okay. We're going to be all right. We in the field know the data. We have to better connect the dots across this state and all the other states, clearly understanding that this country is in a pivotal point in time if we're going to be competitive as we continue to move forward. So how can you help us? How can we collectively help you to get that message across? Because I know that's been an issue across the country.
It's a fascinating dissidence in our country that every survey anyone ever does, every parent thinks their school is okay, but the rest of the country isn't good enough. And it's always somebody else's school, someone else's neighborhood, someone else's children. And I think we have a hard time looking ourselves in the eye and saying, is this school really what our children need? And I talked to one example, John Legend, fantastic musician. People don't know, went to Penn, University of Pennsylvania, worked at a management consulting firm for a while. He said, I finally realized later that the high school I went to was a dropout factory. I didn't quite realize it. I was lucky enough to make it through. The rest of my family didn't. And we didn't quite realize what was going on. And I was a lucky one. But, and I was going back a few years and it hadn't changed. And so what I think we have to do is a couple things. And everywhere we're struggling. This is not an Arkansas issue. This is a national issue. First of all, I think we have to tell the truth. And where we have high schools of 30, 40, 50, 60% dropout rates, that is economically unsustainable and morally unacceptable. And as a country, we've stood on the sidelines and just watched generation of children fall by the wayside. You guys all know this. There was a time in which there actually was an acceptable dropout rate. There was a time in which you could drop out and actually get a decent job and support your family on your own home. Those jobs are gone. High school dropouts today are basically condemned to poverty and social failure. There are no good jobs out there for high school dropout. There are almost no good jobs with a high school diploma. Some form of higher education has to be the goal for every single child. 4-year universities, 2-year community colleges, trade, technical, vocational training. So I think we have to tell the truth. We have to be transparent around it. And I think there's always this interesting nexus of crisis and opportunity. Our country's in a tough spot now. We got a really high unemployment rate. We've flatlined. We talk about the college completion rates is fascinating. We led the world a generation ago, not that long, but we're 12th. It wasn't that we dropped. We stagnated. We flatlined. Other countries invested. Other countries took us more seriously, and they passed us by. We've become complacent. We've become a little self-satisfied. And I think we're paying a huge price for that. So I think it's telling the truth. It's challenging the status quo. It's really trying to get parents and the community to get engaged, that this is going to crush us economically. Whether you look at national security, like the military guys, whether it's economic security, whether it's a civil rights issue of our generation, whatever lens you look at, this is the biggest thing going in our country, and we are at a crossroads. And we can get better. We can get better at, I think, an extraordinarily rapid rate. What I think has been missing, too, is the courage to take on the situations where it's not working. Our best schools, our best high schools, our best middle schools, our best elementary schools are amongst the best in the world. Absolutely, literally world class. We have too many schools in the middle and far too many where they're systematically producing failure rather than success. And we have not had the courage to take that on.
Yes, sir, we have a question right there, right, the white shirt, right there.
Secretary Duncan, we want to welcome you to Arkansas. Of course, we're excited and pleased that you saw fit to come here tonight. I'm Jimmy Jeffries. I am chairman of the Arkansas Senate Education Committee. I have a two-part question. First of all, I'm a retired school teacher and educator myself, but I want to know your ideas on what we, not only as a state of Arkansas, but the nation of the United States, how can we make education cool for our young people? How can we light that spark to make them want to be educated? Secondly, outside of the obvious of higher salaries, what did England do to make the profession be an attractive, something that people wanted to go into? What can we do to do that for our teachers as well?
These are great questions, and none of these have easy answers. So how do you make education cool? How do you make it hip? We've had a culture, and again, this to me just gets at you talk about peeling the onion and getting to the heart, the core of issues. This to me is a huge challenge because we've been scared of success. We've been scared to highlight excellence. We treated everybody the same. And this idea that if you're good, that you then become an outcast, that is really deep psychologically. And that often is unfortunately the norm rather than the exception. And so I think all of us collectively have to stop being scared of talking about excellence and celebrating excellence. Great teachers, great principals, great superintendents, great board members, great states. We're all working with challenging students. We're getting radically different results. And I think there's been this fear of shining the big spotlight there. So whether it's political leaders, whether it's education leaders, whether it's us, I'm trying to push the media very, very hard. We have children every single day who are beating unbelievable odds just to get to school and get an education. We have teachers that are giving of themselves 14, 15, 16 hours a day. Why don't we know who they are? Why don't we talk about them? Why don't we celebrate them? And I think England, not through one thing, but a series of things, a series of campaigns, a series of sort of national activities helped to really raise and elevate the stature of the profession. And so it's not something we're going to solve overnight, but I think it's something we have to take full on and take responsibility for. And I think for this, it's interesting. We have about 1 million teachers retiring, a baby boomer generation coming out. I think we have to challenge this next generation of young folks that this is a call to service. That if you want to make a difference in our country, if you want to make a difference in your communities, there's nothing more important you can do than become a teacher. And we actually want to launch a national teacher recruitment campaign this fall to start to do that and get that next generation to step up.
Yes, sir. Thank you, man. Let's see. That's Representative. Is that Representative Walker out there? All right.
Wait for the microphone, John.
Thank you. How do you cause school districts to focus upon addressing poor children's needs and those of black children? I noticed you did not mention that in particular.
Well, when I talk about achievement gaps, that's exactly what I'm referring to. I'm referring to poor, minority, black and brown children who, in virtually every district, in every state throughout the country, have radically worse results than children. Some districts have done a great job of closing those gaps, but as a country, when I talk about the insidious achievement gap, that's exactly what I'm referring to. So again, none of these are easy. I think a couple things have to happen. first, that early childhood piece, I can't overemphasize how important that is. We have to get to our babies. We have to get to our 3- and 4-year-olds. I wonder how our best kindergarten teachers in the world teach the wide disparity of ability levels coming in. You have children coming into kindergarten who are reading fluently. You have other children who don't know their colors, who literally don't know the front of a book from the back of a book. They've never been read to. There's some children who don't know their real names. They've been called a nickname all their life. How is that kindergarten teacher supposed to work with all those children? And so high-quality early childhood programs, again, this can't be glorified babysitting, this can't be watching TV, but high-quality programs in disadvantaged communities have to be a huge piece of this. Secondly, children who historically struggle, they need more time. Our school day is too short, our school week is too short, our school year is too short. Adults usually clap when I say that, and all my students boo when I say that, so we definitely don't have consensus on this issue. But when you look at high-performing, high-poverty schools, whether they're traditional schools or charter schools or whatever, they have one common element. They're working harder, more time. They're open 9, 10, 11, 12 hours a day. They're open on Saturdays. They're open 12 months of the year, and our students need those kinds of opportunities. Third, it's all about high expectations. And those high-performing schools, they start talking about college in kindergarten. Their kindergarten room isn't room 102, it's the Spelman room or the Morehouse room. It's the room of their teacher's college, where that teacher's alumni from. It is building a culture where the expectation is to go to college. And so I think there's a series of common sense things that we can do, but we have to do them systemically to make sure that every single student has a chance to be successful.
Yes, we have a question right on the second row right here. If you'll just wait for the microphone.
Arkansas is a large rural state, and in certain areas, the difficulties of rural access in the small districts is it's just unbelievable, the lack of resources they face in the rural areas. Do you have any programs to address the rural areas of Arkansas?
It's a real challenge. Again, none of these challenges are unique. And so as I've traveled to rural communities, and whether it's here or whether it was a remote village, Native Alaskan village that didn't have running water, whether it's on Native American reservations, huge challenges. We have to think very creatively about how we get teachers to come and stay. I think the constant teacher turnover is a huge challenge. Money is a piece of it. Often housing is a big challenge. And it's actually interesting. We have some resources, but literally yesterday I met with Tom Vilsack, who's my partner who runs the Department of Agriculture. They actually have huge amounts of money for rural communities around loan subsidies for housing. So we're going to try and do some things really creatively. We have to partner in some very different ways with the Department of Agriculture. I think technology and broadband access is a big one, and working with the FCC and the Department of Commerce. And so it's not something we at the Department of Education can do it alone, but working with sister agencies, I think we have a chance to get a lot better. But attracting and retaining talent, thinking about housing challenges, and making sure that in those rural communities, if they can't have that great AP teacher in their class or in their school, they still have access to that AP curriculum is hugely important. I think technology can help to be a big equalizer in this battle.
Additional questions? Yes, sir, right here. Mr. Patrick Banks.
Hello, Secretary Duncan. I'm Patrick Banks. I'm a student at the Clinton School. You talked a lot about data-driven reflection and results, and I'm with you there. I think it's needed. And I think about two other educational leaders.
No statement. Get your question, P. Banks.
One is Jeffrey Canada, who you support because...
P. Banks.
Yeah, well, it's coming. But one is Jeffrey Canada, who you support because obviously President Obama is calling for replications of the Harlem Children's Zone. But another big name right now is Michelle Reed, Chancellor of D.C. Public Schools. And I wanted to know, what is your opinion of her incentives program, paying teachers for their performance? And do you believe that it can be replicated in other parts of the country?
So first of all, in Jeffrey Canada, I think he's an absolute hero. And we talk about closing achievement gaps, it's not just long days, wraparound services. If a child is hungry, they can't learn. If a child can't see the blackboard, they can't learn. So addressing the physical, the emotional, the psychological needs, the nutritional needs of students are hugely important. I think those are foundational. I think what Jeff has done, starting on a small couple block radius and then expanding, is exactly the kind of wraparound services we need. We need healthcare clinics, we need baby colleges, we need to be educating parents at the same time we're educating children. And so we need that comprehensive set of activities. And so, yeah, we're thrilled to be trying to replicate and build upon his model across the country. And I think if we do that, we're going to see dramatically better results for children and communities who historically have struggled to achieve. I think, to be very clear, no one goes into education to make $1 million. That's not the motivation. So anything that thinks money is just going to solve the problem, I think is short-sighted or oversimplifying. So it's a piece of a set of things to do to reward teachers who are doing a great job. Yes, I think we should absolutely do that. I'm a little radical here. I think we should pay math and science teachers more money. We have a national shortage of math and science teachers. We've had a shortage for a couple decades. So pick a number, $5 grand, $10 grand, $15 grand. If you want to pay a math and science teacher more money to go to a rural community and stay, you need to do that. I think in very tough communities, we need to pay great teachers to go there. We've had almost no incentives for great teachers or great principals to go to disadvantaged areas, and frankly, lots of disincentives for them to do that. Talent too often tends to migrate to relatively easier communities, and we have to reverse some of those things. So money can be a piece of it, but let me be really clear, and it can be an important piece. What you need to do is give teachers an opportunity to be successful. If you talk to any teacher while they leave the profession, money's like 6 on the list. They need a great principal, and I think we haven't talked nearly enough about leadership. Great principals attract talent, they retain talent. Bad principals are threatened by talent, they run it off, they're scared by it, they don't retain it. Great teachers want to be part of a team of great teachers. If you put one great teacher in a dysfunctional school, they'll be chewed up and spit out 6 months later. You put 25 great teachers together in historically underperforming schools, and you're going to see some magic happen. So money can be a piece of the equation, but great leadership, real support, a real sense of camaraderie and colleagues who want to make a difference, and we put all those pieces together, then you start to, I think, have a proposition that great teachers will go and work in tough communities. So I think Michelle's on, the financial piece is a piece of it, but you have to go beyond that as well.
Question, Senator Elliott.
The kid in the back of the room. Mr. Secretary, I wonder if the administration has given any thought to something that I think is often overlooked when we talk about disincentives, for example, making school cool, and that is some of the very youngsters that we need to incentivize to think education is good, have made mistakes in life, have paid for those mistakes, even in high school, like they've done their penance, so to speak. But there is a disincentive built in that they are not motivated because they know, for example, they can get an education, but they can't get a job, and the responsibility that we all have around that. They can get a high school education, but they can't get a grant, or they can't get even a loan to go to college. So I'm wondering, as we think about how our nation is going to become more educated, how do we address that issue? Because we're missing some of our most fantastic young people who've made mistakes, and now they're continuing to pay for life.
So if you could just specify, are you talking about students who've been in trouble with the law? Are you talking about undocumented students?
I'm talking about students who've gotten in trouble with the law. I taught juniors and seniors in high school. It was not uncommon. They got in trouble at that point. But then they have a life sentence even after. Some of my students even went to prison, and now they're out of prison, going to college if they can, can't get a job. Yeah. So they're disincentivized.
No, it's a great question. What we do to help folks who have stumbled or had a few bumps along the road to get back on track and to give them a chance, I think we can be very creative there. And so it's a great question. What you do around expungement, what you do around second chances, I think is a big area, and that we can be more thoughtful on. I will also say we have to do a heck of a lot better job of stopping them from getting in trouble in the first place. And we have to get out in front of this. I think, we know, particularly those young boys who don't have a father at home, not junior, senior, we know at 6 and 7 and 8-year-olds, which of those young boys needs a father figure, needs a mentor, needs a role model. And I promise you, if we did a much better job providing those role models and mentors early on in life, we'd be locking up a lot less students at the back end. We talked about recruiting this next generation of teachers to come in. It's really interesting. Across our country now, less than 2%, less than 1 in 50 of our teachers is an African-American male. It's a huge problem. If you put African-American male and Latino males together, it's like 3.5% of our teachers. How do we expect all of our young boys to have those opportunities? And working with Marion Wright Edelman and some others, we really want to think through how we bring that next generation of talent from the community and to be those mentors, to be those teachers, to be those role models, to be those coaches. And so yes, we need to be creative on the back end, but it just breaks my heart of how many young men who we know are going to struggle. We just sit by passively and watch and then try and fix it at the back end. It's late in the game. We can do better.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank the Compuris family. I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank Marion Wright Edelman, the Clinton Foundation, and what an honor it is for us to host the Secretary of Education. Secretary, thank you for being with us.